Welcome to Write Now Workshop Podcast, where you can write a book and change the world. I'm your host, Kitty Bucholtz, and this is episode 222, Blank Page to Final Draft, an interview with Bryn Donovan, coming to you on Thursday, November 19th, 2020. I actually don't have a ton of notes and other things to tell you because I have been busy writing this week. I hope you have also gotten a lot done, whether it is putting down new words or editing or sticky noting everything. I've moved some of my sticky notes from the dining room onto the back of my door in my office because, as my husband pointed out, there's nothing on the back of the door. So he sticky noted his door too with his middle grade study that middle grade story that he's working on right now. So I am neck deep into happy thoughts about writing and stories and love and happily ever after and the hero and the heroine. So I hope whatever you're doing, whether or not you're like murdering somebody or doing some sort of, monster event, I hope you're having fun. I hope you're having a really, really fun time. Remember, the first draft is all about you having a really good time. And then the second draft, you have to start thinking more about the reader. So as a matter of fact, with all of this nano writing frenzy going on, I have decided that I wanted to have all editors as guests during December. And since the episode comes out every Thursday, we have 5 Thursdays in December, which means that we will have 5 fabulous people talking about editing for the whole month. And in fact, there's a few more people on my not really lists, but people I've been talking to who I'm like, oh, I think that these people might come on to talk about editing too. It could go on into January, which will be great. So we're definitely going to be talking to Lisa Cron, who wrote Wired for Story and Story Genius, and her friend Jenny Nash, which is how I heard about Jenny. She's with Author Accelerator. She's the CEO there. We've got Ali Mashadi, who's the CEO of the Writers Ally, which is another company that has several editors working there who do book editing. And then we've got 2 agents, Sarah Megabo from KT Literary and Julie Gwynn from the Seymour Agency. All of them going to be talking about editing, what to do with your story after you've gotten that first draft out. So it's going to be a fabulous month, even if you're busy having fun and eating and baking and cooking and whatever in December. Make sure that you make a plan to listen to all 5 of those episodes. It's going to be fantastic for your writing. This episode is also going to be similarly fantastic because Bryn Donovan wrote a book that just came out called Blank Page to Final Draft. And in fact, everything that we talked about was so much on that topic that I was like, well, we're just going to make that the episode name as well. So this is a great episode. Regardless of where you're at in the process, we're probably talking about it during this episode. And Bryn has tons of experience. She's super great at her job, which is as an editor. And also she's a writer and she writes books for writers. She really knows her stuff. She's also just the most encouraging person. So no matter what you need, you're probably going to get it in this episode. Have I ever said that about an episode before? So here we go. Let's talk to Bryn. Happy writing. Keep on going. Don't get discouraged. Just keep on going. Write for yourself. Remember, this is supposed to be a fun thing that you're doing. So here we go with Bryn. Today's guest is Bryn Donovan. Bryn Donovan is the pen name of Stacey Donovan, the author of several romance novels, children's books, gift books, and nonfiction books, including Master Lists for Writers and 5,000 Writing Prompts. Her day job is executive editor at Hallmark Publishing, and she blogs about writing and positivity at bryndonovan.com. She has an MFA in creative writing from the University of Arizona, and she works in publishing. An eternal optimist, she believes in being your true self, expressing yourself creatively, and not letting anyone set limits for you. Welcome, Bryn.
Oh, thank you, Kitty. It is so nice to be back here. I love what you do, and inspiration you give to writers. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I have to say, I'm super excited to have you on as Bryn because Bryn Donovan is also all about optimism and encouragement and helping writers. So, yay.
It's great.
Oh, well, listen, people who've been listening to my show really regularly probably feel like they already know you because of how much I talk about you and Hallmark Publishing and Hallmark authors. There are days when I think, I got to be careful. This has got to be, I mean, because I want it to be, I got to keep my podcast like as even as possible, try to get all the genres in, all the different kinds of things. But there are days when I'm like, has this become the Hallmark show or the Revell show?
Oh,
But,
that's fantastic.
yeah.
Well,
You
we've had a lot going on lately, so
right. And and you think about and talk about people that you know. So and
absolutely.
yeah, meeting
Please.
you. Yeah, sorry, I keep talking over top of you because I'm like so excited to just have you back on the show, but I'm going to be quiet for a second.
Yeah, well, we've had a lot going on with Hallmark Publishing and books becoming movies and new releases. So we really appreciate it.
Yay, good, good. Well, anytime that I can help, you know that I am here for you. But in the meantime, we're here to talk about Bryn, the author and the writing teacher, really. I originally started hearing, so your brand new book that is just 2 days old by the time that everybody hears this is called Blank Page to Final Draft. And I originally heard about it when you decided to start doing a video series for a year that kind of was what became the book. Is that right?
That's right. So yeah, Blank Page to Final Draft started out as a YouTube series, and actually the YouTube videos take you all the way through getting the first draft. And then at that point, I realized that my plan to take you through editing wasn't going to be really great in video form. So editing is very specific, and I thought, I just don't know how to make this into a really good videos. And plus, everybody's working at their own pace. And so the Blank Page to Final Draft book grew out of the YouTube series. Yes.
Nice.
But I had wanted to write it for a while or teach it for a while, either way, because for me personally as a writer, it took me so long, it took me years to be able to finish a manuscript. And then the first one I finished was such a mess that I didn't even know how to edit it.
I hear you.
I know that I'm not the only one in this situation. You would have thought that it would have come, I thought it would come more easily to me because I do have an MFA in creative writing. It's always been my thing. And it didn't come easily to me at all. I learned a lot of lessons the very hard way. And then when I started working in publishing, I learned even more.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to write the book to spare people that kind of pain of wanting to finish a novel, and a novel that is really worthy of publishing, to want to get to that point for years and not being able to get there. I want to save time for other people. So that's why I did it.
That's awesome. What a great idea. And what a great heart for it. I'm often talking to writers about, what's the why, what's the story reason or the core message. And I love that there are people writing books for writers because they just genuinely want to help other people to have an easier path.
Yes, yes. And I think that when people are working towards their writing goals, unfortunately, the stories that they hear most are about easy successes. And so they hear about the person in their writing network who's an indie author and publishes a book every 2 months. And they hear about the 21-year-old who got the 6 or 7 figure book deal.
Yeah.
These are the stories that get told over and over. And so it can be disheartening. It can make really good writers think, oh, maybe this isn't for me. I'd been thinking about this, and then I went to a conference a little while back, and there was an interview or Q&A with an author who I like very much. And someone asked her how long it took her to get published. And she said, I will tell you the truth. I wrote 6 full novels before I got one published. I wrote 1 million words, and that's the truth. I worked really hard on a book, tried to get it published, struck out, did it again 6 times, or did it again 5 times.
Yeah.
And I thought it was great that she shared that story, because I think they're more common. Those stories are more common than people realize.
Yeah.
And it's good for people to hear that just because it may take you a little longer to get there, doesn't mean that it's for you, isn't for you. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And everybody has, not only every individual person will have a totally different journey than the person they're sitting next to, but also each book is different. So if your first one was hard, your second one might just flow out, or your first one might have been.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And of course, I talk to authors all the time, and that's really their experience too, where some of them are a struggle and some of them they're just like charmed,
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that I have seen, and talking to authors, all kinds of authors, not just the authors I work with at Hallmark, but talking to authors, sometimes the ones that are a struggle wind up being like these great books, wind up being their favorite books. So the struggle, I think, is just part of it.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of aspiring writers, they have a couple of things going against them that they need help with. And one of them is just how to structure their time and structure the project, And so with Blank Page to Final Draft, it has 52 steps. If you do 1 step a week, you'll have a polished, ready to publish or ready to submit draft at the end.
Nice.
And follow it along step by step. And you don't have to quit the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Who can do that? You're going to school, you have your job, you've got your kids, maybe you're taking care of someone. And so it's designed to fit into your life. And so I think sometimes people just need help with the structure, how to break it down into steps. And then on the editing process, I think there's not nearly as much practical advice out there about how to edit as there is about how to write a draft or how to get. And so much of writing is editing, more than people think. So I really wanted to break down those 2 things in particular, how to structure your time, how to plan it out, and then how to do the editing process. Yeah. So if you have a really messy draft, you could use this book just to edit it too.
Right. Yeah. And especially, wow, my first book, it's amazing that it ever actually became something that was publishable. But first it was a proposal, just 3 chapters for, oh my gosh, it used to be a really popular competitor to Hallmark. And then they went under, in the 90s, and I can't think of the name of it, but I pitched to an editor, at this big romance group, and she was like, great, send me the full. And so I was working on it, and then I found out she either got pregnant and quit or moved to another company, or
Isn't it terrible? That happened to me with Harlequin too, revise and rewrite. And I sent it in, and then oh, she's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, we're not interested.
Right. With the publisher, I almost threw a name out there, and then I was like, wait, maybe they still exist.
Yeah, right. And you want to be careful not to offend.
Yeah. So
yeah, that book, it went through. So it started there. Then I sent a proposal, or it's a matter of meeting people at conferences. It's huge. I met you at a conference.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So then I kind of tweaked it a little bit, because this publisher published a slightly different kind of romance, and then that became an almost but no, and then something else happened, and then somebody said, have you ever heard of chicklet? You just seem like you would have more of a chicklet voice. I was like, no, I don't know what that is, because it was kind of newish. And then I started writing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, if there were no rules and I could write anything I want, this would be the way I write.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Things just bring you along. And So here's one of the things though. What do you think? So you and I having a conversation, you probably have some notes that you were thinking maybe you could go through in order, but we'll probably go off on a couple
Yeah, I
tangents.
didn't. So this is great.
Okay, good. So I have a 8-week coaching program called Finish Your Book because this year more than ever, I have found a lot of people are just losing their energy and their creativity. You know, we've got a lot of stress going on in our world right now. Um, but there are times when the best thing you can do is not finish that book, then move on. So you've been, as a writer and an editor, probably on both sides of that fence in both instances. So I guess that's four sides of a square.
Right.
What are some of your thoughts about when to push through and when to realize that maybe what you really need to do is start with something
This
else?
is a great question. And I think it depends on a few things. Um, I think when you're feeling resistance and don't want to finish, the more you can do to think about why that is, the better. And my like silly method for getting at this is to like write at the top of a piece of paper. And I do this for all kinds of problem solving. Right at the top of the piece of paper, okay, Bryn, why don't you want to finish this book? And free write as fast as you can. And then
Oh,
you'll get answers there that you didn't have otherwise. Uh,
yeah.
your goal is to fill up the page and you'll get to things. Sometimes the reason that you feel resistant, so there's a few different reasons I think that people feel resistance. So it'd be a little bit of a long answer, but it's such
This
an
is
important
great. Yeah.
issue. Um, Sometimes people feel resistance because subconsciously they know there is a problem with the plot, but they don't want to face it consciously, and their conscious brain is protecting them from it. You know, but if part of you knows that this plot doesn't make sense, that it's not working, that there's a hole, that there's lack of tension, any kinds of problems like that, you consciously will not want to work on it. You know, because your conscious creative brain is like, look, this is not going to come together. You know,
Yeah.
it can be painful to confront a real plot problem with the story because you think, well, all of my writing is going to go out the window. I'll just practically have to start from scratch. Now, often when you actually confront it, like when you first see the problem, you're like, this is insurmountable. I should just start with a blank slate. But give yourself 3 days. Tell yourself, hey, subconscious, and I do this out loud. Hey, subconscious, can you please fix that plot hole? Can you please fix that plot problem? Then don't think about it for a few days. I've done this a few times, and my subconscious, like, well, you know, you're brushing your teeth a few days later, and my subconscious is like, oh, hey, so I figured that out. This is how I did. So yeah, so one of the reasons you feel resistance is because your story, the structure of your story, there's a problem and it isn't working. Um, Another reason can be that you have a lot of deep-seated negative feelings about writing that are, and so you're sabotaging yourself.
Yeah.
You know, your doubts about yourself as a writer, your doubts about your chances of succeeding, your fears of finishing a draft and then other people have to read it, right? If you always
Yeah.
abandon them, you never have to face that moment where people give you feedback.
True.
So sometimes it's doubts and fears. And I write a lot in the beginning of blank page to final draft. I go through some of those common fears and encourage people to re-script and they like substitute a different idea instead.
Yeah.
And then the third reason sometimes people want to abandon things is because every new idea is fun. Every new idea feels like this genius idea, right?
So true.
That's the fun part, right? But if you don't get through the hard work part, you're never going to get to your goal. Now if you just like starting stories and not finishing them, then that's great, do it, you know.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if your goal is really to finish, then you have to go ahead and be willing to do that hard part as well as the fun. When an idea is new, it always seems like the best idea in the world. When you get into it, you're working through all these different things, you know, it loses its luster a little bit,
Yeah.
but it's worth it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I always think with the idea of like, should I set this aside and start something new? Now, look, if you've finished a few books that you felt really great about, then sure, set it aside, start something new. If you've never finished a novel, just finish it. There's some things that you can only learn by finishing a novel.
Yeah.
There's no way you can learn how to do it. Yeah. And you'll think, oh, but this idea is better. You're going to have time. You can write that idea too.
Yeah.
But you've got to learn things that you can only learn by getting to the end of the draft. So.
Yeah. And the other thing is that by the time you are 2, 3, 4 books into your writing career, you start realizing, oh, this is a totally normal problem for either all writers everywhere, or this is my totally normal problem that happens at the same time in every book.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, going back to the thing about subconsciously knowing there's a problem. The advice that writers give each other all the time is just keep writing no matter what. Don't overthink it. I think this is terrible advice. So, because if there's a problem, it's friction. It's like walking against a tide. It feels terrible. And sometimes the best thing you can do is stop and get feedback. So one thing that I'm suggesting in Blank Page to Final Draft that I really almost see nobody else suggest. So it's a little bit going against conventional wisdom. I'm asking people to get feedback at the basic story idea stage and at the three chapter stage.
Oh, yeah.
Almost nobody does this. They're like, no, wait till the end. Don't show anyone. This is bad advice, in my opinion, because if you have a chronic problem in the plot, in the premise, in the setup, if you have a chronic writing problem that would be really easier to fix now than to fix after you've written 75,000, 9,000 words.
Yeah.
Catch it now. It's going to make it so much easier. And then there's other good things about bringing in feedback at that point. First of all, if you've never gotten feedback before, it's an opportunity to go ahead and deal with that issue of getting feedback. Being scared of feedback holds so many writers back, being terrified of feedback,
And it seems like psychologically, it would just be so much easier to get feedback on an idea because it's so small than on a 90,000 word book, which is like, I've just put months of my life into this. How could you tell me, such terrible things?
And part of the reason I came to this idea about getting feedback at those stages is that at Hallmark Publishing, most of our book deals are made on proposal only. And the reason for that is Hallmark does such a specific type of story. Not as specific as some people think, but it has a lot of specific parameters.
Yeah.
And so our process is that a writer turns in a proposal, and if I think it's promising, I work with the writer on the proposal. I bring it into a pitch meeting with producers, and they kind of workshop. They actually workshop it very diligently. I've learned so much about storytelling from programming at Hallmark.
Wow.
And this proposal gets worked out. Like, it'll go through 2, 3, 4 drafts sometimes before we finally feel like, okay, this story idea is solid, and we're gonna make an offer, and you can write the book. And what I've seen is this really rigorous, painstaking process at the proposal stage. And I know this myself because I wrote one of the Hallmark books.
Yeah.
Makes the drafting so much easier because you've worked out so many problems already.
Yeah.
So, but people can be very protective of their idea. Like, what if people don't like it? What if people steal it? Which, like, mostly nobody does because they like their ideas.
Yeah.
People always like their own ideas better,
Yeah.
So getting that feedback at the just basic story idea stage and at the 3 chapter mark stage will catch problems, and then you don't carry them through your whole manuscript. You know how hard it is. I just started cross stitching again, and if you get off by one stitch, you have to pull out everything.
Yeah.
And novels are the same way, so you got to spare yourself that. And then the other good thing is, if you have people who read just 3 chapters, they're going to be more likely to be beta readers for your full novel later, because they want to see how it turned out.
Yeah.
You get them invested. It's really hard to find a good beta reader for a complete novel because it's a ton of work.
Yeah.
And so it's also another way to like bring your beta readers along and get them interested.
Nice. That's a great idea. I have never heard anybody talk about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to bringing them in like that. So.
Nice. So in your book, your brand new book that just came out, is that part of the process in this 52-week, 52 step? Because you don't have to make it last a year, but it's 52 steps. You could do it over a year or however.
Once a week, or you can do it lightning fast, or you can take it slower. Honestly, if you think about the books that you admire most, I guarantee you most of them, they took more than a year to write, Yeah. So people always beat themselves up for speed. Think about your favorite books.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's part of the process at the story idea stage and at the 3-chapter marker. And then the rest of the time, I'm encouraging people to not keep on rewriting their chapters,
Right.
People have that trouble too. And they're like, I'll just rewrite chapter 1 17 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got these checkpoints in here, and here. The rest of the time, full speed ahead, write your story. Yeah.
Nice. Now, there's probably some people listening who are thinking, but I'm a pantser. That isn't really how I do it. What are your thoughts when you're talking to somebody who says I'm a pantser?
If you're a pantser and you've completed a few or several books that you're very happy with, you're very happy with the results, happy with where you are in your writing journey, I've got nothing to say to you. Keep doing what you're doing. Absolutely. But if you say I'm a pantser and you're not happy with where you are, you're not finishing books, or you're finishing books that you're not happy with, or you're finishing books that you're not getting the response that you want from audiences or agents or editors. If that's the case, then you can't really say that pantsing is working for you. Okay. You can't say this is exactly the right way for me to go.
Yeah.
You owe it to yourself to at least try a different method. And that like old saying that, insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. I don't think it's insanity. I think that's what most of us do.
Yeah.
Change is really uncomfortable. For people who are very right-brained and creative, plotting is difficult at first. My MFA is in poetry.
Oh, right, right.
You need to learn how to do the structure of plot. It's a big change. But yeah, if you say I'm a pantser, but you're not at all happy with your results, to change your progress, you got to change your process in one way or another. And I think you should give it a try. But because I know that a lot of people hate the idea of plotting, I've given some ways to do a very, very simple, one way in particular. I have my method for plotting a whole novel on a 5x7 index card.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because just start there. If you do that exercise, I think you'll have enough. It'll be way more structure than you've had before.
Right, right. Yeah, a lot of times I talk to people about like going on vacation. Once in a while, you might go on vacation where you're like, let's just get in the car and drive. My husband and I did that once because he thought it would be awesome. And I was like already breaking out in hives by the time I got my seatbelt buckled. It was an experience. I won't forget it, but I also don't want to repeat it. But even for the trips where I'm like, I don't know, we're going to go home and I don't know, we'll see people and we'll eat things and we'll do things. You still have a fair idea. Like at least you can get there. You have a fair idea of who you'll probably call to see if you'll hang out with them, and a couple of things that are probably happening in your town at that time of year. So it's not really that it's completely unstructured. You just feel like you don't have any stress and pressure about having to do something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of people have a fear that they will lose the wonderful moments of discovery and inspiration as you draft. And that is not true at all. You will still have surprises. Your plot may change as you go through. But, and I think the vacation analogy is really good. Like just because you bought a plane ticket to Paris doesn't mean you know everything that'll happen and you may as well not go.
Right.
It's really like that. You know, you don't know what's going to happen, and you will make changes, but when you have at least a little bit of a plot outline, you're not going to sit down and think, well, now I have no idea what to do next.
Right.
You've got some problems in advance. Yeah.
So it sounds like this book, when I started watching the videos, because I was like, oh, I know Bryn, so I'm going to watch her videos and like subscribe and support her and everything, you know. And I was like, these are really good. I got to share them with other people, which I did. And absolutely. Oh, and I wanted to know, is the portion of the series that you did, is it still up on your YouTube channel?
It is actually, yeah. So I unceremoniously stopped doing them. Yeah, when I got to the editing, I didn't think they were going to be very good in video form.
Yeah, how do you, show?
Yeah. So,
yeah. And so what's the name of your channel, or what can people search in YouTube to find your videos? Probably just the name of the book they can.
Yeah, honestly, it's just Bryn Donovan, and but you can also search blank page to final draft. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So at first, when I was watching just the first couple, I was like, oh, this is pretty good. This is like a series for people who haven't written a book before and want to, get started and just need some direction. And then listening to you talk now, I'm like, this sounds like the book can be used by whatever level you're at. Does that make sense?
I hope so, and I think so. And a lot of times, even experienced authors, if they've been away for it for a little bit, they've had a tough year,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, kind of need like a way to think about it and a structure and a motivation to get back into it again, to get it to hit their stride again. And I think it can be used for that too. Also, I've known a few writers who have written really good books, but they always feel in kind of a state of chaos, in trying to structure it with all of the other demands of life.
Yeah.
And so it also just gives you a way to structure your time so you're not using all that mental space. It takes a lot of mental space to plan out. Okay, then I'm going to do this. Then I'm going to write this many pages by this date. That project management takes a lot of mental load itself.
Yeah.
So it takes that load off of you. It's just like, go these, step by step. So,
Perfect.
yeah.
So this is the third book. I noticed that your nonfiction books don't have a series name exactly, but all the covers look exactly, you can tell it's part of a series. So tell us a little.
It's kind of like the third one in the trilogy. So my first one came out 5 years ago, and it was because I had my writing blog, bryndonovan.com, and then I hadn't planned to do a book, but some of the content on there, the lists that I made for writers, that I made for myself first, and all of my books started out as things I did for myself.
Nice.
Even Blank Page to Final Draft. The first book I ever got a book contract for, and it was a small book contract, but for an author, your first one is big no matter what.
Yeah.
It just is. And the first book I ever got a contract for was after making the schedule for myself.
Nice.
So all of my books for writers are things I made for myself first. So on my blog, I had these lists that I had made for myself as a writer that I thought, oh, I'll share them on my blog. And then they got really viral, and my name stopped being attached to them. So I thought, well, I'm just gonna publish a book so I can, copyright it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then the book really took off. So that was Masterless for Writers. That was the first one. And I'm gonna do hopefully next year I'll do an updated version of it.
Oh, good.
This one has a few a couple for romance writers, a few not family friendly lists. I want to do an updated version because I've heard from people a lot that they would like to have it for teens and younger writers too. So I'm going to do a larger family friendly version of this book hopefully next year. We'll see. Sometimes I, take on too many projects.
Right. I hear you.
My second book was 5,000 writing prompts. And I'm really proud of this one because it has writing prompts by genre. It has writing prompts like hundreds if you want to do a blog and need content ideas. It has poetry exercises because that's my background. I've taught poetry workshops in the past. And this one is family friendly. So I would say middle grade and up, it's fine.
Okay.
And so that was the second one. And so, yeah, so it's kind of a trilogy. Blank Page to Final Draft will be the third one.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Now, I know that we have people listening who are also nonfiction writers, or like you, they write fiction and nonfiction. So let's just kind of take a path in the other direction and talk for a minute about. So you told us kind of how you got the idea for your books. Give us some ideas of how things worked out differently in a better or worse way. I mean, there's always the unexpected, and how you started feeling like, okay, I've really got this nonfiction thing down now too.
That's a great question. So, yeah, because Master List for Writers was the first thing I self-published. So I had published a couple of novels with other publishers, and it was my first time doing that. And I think if you're going to do nonfiction, well, it depends. So I'm not talking about memoir, but
Right.
other type of nonfiction books. You know, the more you can think of the end user in mind, and try not to make it too much about you. Make it about them, the better you'll do. And I think that's why my blog has had success that it has, is because it's not really me focused. Once in a while, I'll write about myself, but mostly I'm trying to offer what other people might want, might find interesting, might find useful, you know. So really thinking about that audience, you know, and focusing on them, I think is so important.
Yeah.
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 So,
And that's what, I mentioned before we started recording. That's what I try to do in the podcast interviews. On the one
yeah,
hand, of
yeah,
course, I want my
exactly.
guests to look awesome, but it really has to be about the listeners.
Absolutely. That's what makes it so good. Yeah.
Oh,
To
thank you.
focus on that audience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What they want, what they need, and what'll be fun.
Right. Right. Okay, so there's so many things that you have been doing in your life, writing related, and apparently feel like I should touch on every single one of them. So, uh, but I won't. But I'm like, oh, let's talk about that and that. So here's another one that I think would be remiss of me not to mention, especially because people always want to know, what is an editor thinking about this? Like, what's an editor's advice on this? So you are executive editor for Hallmark Publishing, and I don't even know if you have any other editors working underneath you. The last time that you and I talked, I don't know that you did, but
Right. So I work with freelance editors who have really good industry experience. Yeah.
excellent.
We couldn't do it without. We couldn't do anything without them.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of hands-on editing too, and sometimes I wind up taking a whole manuscript. And either way, I'm pretty up in the editors and authors business.
Right, right. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the things, and this is something I would think that you don't need notes on at all. What are some of the things that you're like, I love it when I see an author something, or I know that this author has a problem here, it's something that you see also kind of often.
Right. Yes. And in the Blank Page to Final Draft book, I have these mini lessons all along about style,
Oh, great.
and stuff. Because there are some things that I will see, like when we've had open submissions and we're looking at whole manuscripts, there's some things that you just see over and over and over again. And there are things that I have also done myself
Yeah.
before I knew better, you know?
Yeah.
So I have all those, mini lessons throughout the book. At the proposal stage, if I'm just reading a query letter, a synopsis, some of the common problems include not having a clear character motivation, so you're reading it, you're like, well, why? I guess, but why did she go to Lisbon? Why didn't she just, like talk to her mom?
Yeah.
You don't understand, if you don't understand the character motivation, that can be really difficult. I'm always looking in a proposal and a query letter a character arc. In the case of romance, for both characters, and that doesn't apply to every genre. But I'm always looking for a character arc for the main characters, the point of view characters. And what an arc means is how the character learns or grows or changes throughout the story. Like in fantasy novels, for instance, a lot of times it's like the kind of naive farm boy who becomes the hardened warrior.
Yeah, Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so classic. But yeah, or how the bitter loner becomes the villain mastermind, or how the klutzy girl who's new in the big city becomes like the, polished professional. To use a really personal example. So how the character learns and changes and grows, and so we're looking for that in all the main characters. So, and that's where a lot of them fall down is not having the strong character arc. And sometimes I do story development myself, or I have in the past. I'm not going to do it so much. I don't think I'm going to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. But I've developed a whole story. I've written a treatment, and then I've given it to an author. And so I get it cleared by the producers first, right? It gets green light, then I assign it. What I learned when I was doing story development to show the producers, and it sounds so ham-handed and obvious, I put the character arc right at the top. I'm like, here's my character, and over the course of the story, she learns this. Here's my hero, and over the course of the story, he changes in this way, right at the top.
Yeah.
It does. It seems so obvious. It seems so clunky, but boy, does it make you think, and it makes it really clear to understand the story.
Yeah. And I think that could be like a great writing tip for anyone, regardless of whether you plan on sending your book out or self-publishing. There's a book that I've been working on, and I've known these characters for several years, and so the hero, like, I know what a great guy he is, but I was like 10,000 words in thinking there's a problem and I can't quite put my finger on it. So similar to you, I stepped away and thought about it for a while, and then I came back and I was like, oh, I know, because Jack's at the end, I put him at the beginning. Like, who the great guy he turns out to be. I started with him there. I'm like, no, he's not a great guy yet.
Right. Like he can't be too awful, or people are like, ugh.
Right.
It depends on the genre. You can have unlikable main characters, but it's a little bit, trickier, I would say.
Yeah.
Talking about the beginning, another really common problem with manuscripts is the big info dump at the beginning, and they're starting too soon. And so I have a chapter telling me all about her childhood. It's just like, and it's not really in her point of view. It's not her thinking about it. It's just the author telling me page after page about, where she went to college and the dreams she gave up, and what her parents are like. And so that's a really common issue with manuscripts. And in the first chapter, the first 3 pages, the writer has one job, which is to make you keep reading. That's it.
Yeah.
You have one job. And if you imagine showing your first 3 pages to someone and then you think, oh, but that's not the good part, well, then you got to cut those 3 pages.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to make your reader or your agent or your editor care or want to keep reading is to make them really care about what happens to a main character. There are other ways to do it, but that's a really great way to do it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Now you also write, and I'm not sure, I'm sure I read the first one, but I honestly just can't remember if it was science fiction or fantasy. Which
I write paranormal. Why is that hard to say? Romance.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And I have 2 in a series out, and the next one's coming out spring of next year. Yeah.
Nice.
So I actually wanted it to come out sooner, but I've done 3 book projects this year. I couldn't do 4.
Right.
I work really long hours at the publishing business too.
Yeah.
So yeah. So Paranormal Romance. So it's like got magic, and it's steamy and angsty,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, I feel like I wasn't thinking that I would ask this question. Otherwise, I would have been more prepared. Now I'm like, sorry, I can't remember. Is it the same main character or different main characters?
Oh no, great question. So it's a secret society that started in medieval southern Spain that fights all kinds of supernatural evil. And so they have, sort of cells or outposts all over the world. They have a big headquarters in New Mexico that's mostly underground. And yeah, they've got like kind of their own global culture. So, and so you have a different two main characters in each book, but the other characters carry through.
Are carrying through. Yeah. Okay.
Because I always want to catch up a little bit with the other folks too.
Yeah. And most readers, I'm the same, and you sound like you might be too. We like reading a book going, oh, I know who that is. I know who that is.
Absolutely, yeah. And for people who had read books one and two, like after book one, they're like, okay, I didn't know much about Nick, but I'm interested in him. And after book two, they were saying, is he going to be the the one in the third book? I'm like, yeah. You learn a little bit more about a character, and then by the time you're in their point of view and find out how they think, it's kind of exciting because you've only seen them from the outside.
Yeah.
Now you're in their head. Yeah.
So I have kind of a two-pronged question. And I was thinking about, another set of your books there that might be a good jumping off point. So in some cases, you've got a standalone book, and you were talking about making sure that you understand the character arc for the one or two main characters, depending on the genre. And in some cases, you have a series that has pretty much the same main character who still needs to have a character arc in every book, but also it needs to be growing throughout the books. Do you have any advice or thoughts on that particular storyline?
Right. Even if you're writing with the same character over the course of several books, you have to make sure that that ending is very satisfying. That you set up an issue in the beginning that feels like you've gotten somewhere by the end.
Yeah.
Not left hanging. Even if you have a sense at the end that the story will go on. Fellowship of the Ring, like one of my first loves was Lord of the Rings, when I was 9 years old, and it doesn't have an especially satisfying end, Fellowship of the Ring, and that's because it was written as one book. So despite it being one of my very favorites, I think you do want to have a little bit more of a satisfying ending, especially if you're like me and you make your readers wait a while because you're busy with a lot of things.
That's right.
The ending needs to feel like an ending. Yeah. And you have to feel like your character at least made some progress.
Yeah.
And I think a great example, really a master example of how to carry characters throughout a long series is Robin Hobbs, again, fantasy. Robin Hobbs, Fitz and the Fool. Whew. So right? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
I started with The Apprentice. The
Apprentice. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's 9 books total. They're like teenagers in the first one, I think. You know, adolescents. They are middle-aged, by the end. And the character development is absolutely amazing. Yeah. And at the same time, there's a core center to both of those characters that does remain the same, even as they go through massive changes, life stages, changes in identity, really. And so they're wonderful books, and it is a masterclass for that, I think.
Yeah. And that is such a great point, because so in the I even went online and Googled, like, I read so many articles about where exactly you're supposed to start, because there's the order she wrote them, but then there's the order that somebody else thought would be an easier storyline to read. And
that too. Yeah. And who knows? I don't know. I would be interested to know.
Yeah.
The first trilogy trilogy doesn't read to me as if the author is intending to go on. But then maybe she did. It didn't read to me that way. But then you're so glad that she does.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was just thinking, yeah, in the Apprentice book, he's basically a kid. I mean, he's definitely he's becoming a young man. He's not there yet.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it's coming of age.
Yeah. Yeah. But at some point, spoilers, he kind of becomes a wolf. And the most interesting thing that you just kind of pointed out is she figures out how to keep his core personality the same, even though everything that he thinks and feels is different from when, he was like, I'm a man, but now I'm kind of a wolf. You have to read the back cover copy and then you'll understand where I'm going. But his core personality stays the same, which was brilliant.
Yeah. And tone spoilers all over the place, but oh well, you can stop listening now.
Yeah.
All right. So the character, the Fool, too. So he starts out as a boy with a lot of mystery around him. And then you find out that really the Fool is a gender fluid character, And at first, his friend, the other main character, Fitz, is completely freaked out by this.
Yeah.
Later on, not freaked out at all. It's really an interesting journey.
Yeah.
So just fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely
very flawed character. Fitz is incredibly flawed. He's kind of a berserker. Like when he gets into like a combat rage.
Yeah.
Dumb things, tragically dumb things. But then he's also just so human. And just really engaging character.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to just keep finding out like what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this is so much fun. I always love talking to writers. I could talk to writers all day. That's unfortunately not a hyperbole. But there's so much that we can learn both from chatting about it together, listening to a podcast, reading great books like yours on, can I actually do it? But what about reading fiction? Tell us, what are your thoughts about how much reading we should be doing?
It's so important. And I will hear people say, well, I can learn about storytelling from watching TV and watching movies. And you can learn some things, but you can't learn everything. And so if you have all these great ideas and then you sit down and then you don't know how to form sentences, sometimes that it happens to all of us, first of all, happens to all of us. But sometimes that's an indication that you just need to read more fiction. Because it can be easy to get out of the habit, honestly, with the internet, with all the amazing programming on TV. It can be easy to get out of the reading habit. But if you read a lot of fiction, it kind of inspires that narrative voice in your own head that knows how to write sentences, that knows how to tell a story. And so TV and movies can't help you write sentences, can't help you write great prose. You can only get that from fiction. So it is really important. And in fact, if you're struggling with writing block, I think reading a couple of good books is a great prescription for that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you learn to hear this rhythm in your head when you're reading, and then it just sort of starts subconsciously seeping into you, and you find your own rhythm as you're writing.
Absolutely. And I know some people are scared of reading books while they're writing a novel because they're afraid they're going to imitate the author. And I can say, from being a writing teacher and from being an editor, sorry to tell you, your voice is way stronger than you think. So, you're not going to fool anyone. You're still going to sound like you. You're still going to sound like you.
Yeah. That is good news for everyone. Listen, Bryn, this has been so much fun. You've got great fiction, great nonfiction for all of us. Where can people find you and all of your books?
Oh, absolutely. So I have lots of free writing resources at bryndonovan.com. And Blank Page to Final Draft, you can find it in print on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, I believe Target. And the ebook is available pretty much wherever you read ebooks, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, Kobo, etc.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and chatting with us. This has been a great interview.
I loved it. My favorite part of the day. Absolutely. It's only the morning here, but I already know.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. And yeah, and I think I just hope people remember that if they have writing aspirations, not to talk themselves out of them and not to say, oh, I'm going to do it later, because you can do that your whole life, but make a clear plan of where you want to get to and follow that plan. And I think you can do it. So, and thanks for listening and happy writing.